Good afternoon, everybody. We wanted to thank you on behalf of the whole conference committee for joining us today. We've been so pleased and excited with the level of enthusiasm that we've seen today, and certainly after getting some feedback from the first set of sessions and our first two keynotes, we're very pleased with the way the day has gone. When we decided on the topic for this conference, we thought a lot about what we wanted to talk about, and since it's our 10-year anniversary, we wanted to really address something that could both be retrospective, but also looking forward and looking into what social enterprise has the potential to become. So we chose technology because we think it's a great way to examine both of those things, and we think that it's done just that. And so we thank you, Al, for being such enthusiastic and cooperative members of our audience. Before we introduce our final keynote speaker, we'd like to take a moment to thank the team that helped to put this event together. We have a huge group of student volunteers who have been, I'm sure you've seen them all over the building. They've been excellent, and they have all the answers. We also have an amazing conference committee who have done everything from marketing to sponsorship to volunteer coordination, and we couldn't be happier and prouder of the work that has been put in. And finally, we have our session managers who have put together all of the wonderful panels that you've seen today, and I hope that you enjoyed them as much as I did. Finally, I have to thank the Social Enterprise Program at Columbia Business School. We couldn't have done this without them. It's an honor to have worked with Professors Ray Fissman and Bruce Usher, as well as the whole program staff, Sandra Navali, Saiba Anand, Carolyn Tharp, and Emily Moon.
So that's the thanks internal to Columbia Business School and the university at large, but externally, Columbia and the business school, and certainly the social enterprise program, relies on a connection. Many of the students are aware of this, but a connection between practice and theory. So certainly external to the school, we depend on practitioners on our governing board for the conference and the social enterprise program who keep us up to date with a wide range of issues across the entire enormous sphere that you're all discussing today called social enterprise. Additionally, I'd like to again thank all of our corporate partners and sponsors, as well as our in-kind sponsors. You've gotten to enjoy the fruits of their kind gifts out during our lunch and breakfast today. Would also like to point everyone out that there's an awful lot of apples remaining on these tables, and I hope there won't be by the time we leave at the end of the day, so feel free. And next, I would like to point to a very special partner for this year's conference and hopefully in years forward. A few months ago this spring, we began discussion with Marcia Young Cantarella, who enjoys an extremely unique family history in corporate social responsibility. I won't go into detail about that, as she'll be here in just a moment to discuss that with you. But definitely want to welcome Marcia to the stage with a warm welcome and appreciation for the commitment that she's bringing to a new level of discussion in corporate social responsibility at the conference. Dr. Cantarella.
I am thrilled and delighted to be here, and for many reasons which I will proceed to explain. I want to say first that I am an extraordinarily lucky woman. I was granted the blessing of being born into a family with a long tradition of courage and activism and a dedication to the nexus between education and economic well-being. Not just my parents, whom we honor here today, but my grandparents and my aunts as well shared this tradition. And then I married someone who also carried a family lineage of social justice and activism and dedication to education. So I am very lucky. My father, Whitney Young Jr., as head of the National Urban League in the 1960s, was the money guy of the civil rights movement. He helped the private sector see its place in creating greater equity for all. He was one of the reasons this conference can exist as one of the architects of the corporate social responsibility movement. One of the leaders with whom My father shared great ties with David Rockefeller of Chase Bank. Among other activities, the two of them were among the creators of the National Urban Coalition, using a position paper crafted by a young Chase vice president named Francesco Cantarella. Francesco, a Columbia journalism alumnus, acting as Rockefeller's proxy at Urban League events, including my father's funeral, told me many years later that he remembered meeting me at an Urban League dinner when he was speaking to my mother and was introduced to me as I was all of 15, which officially made him a dirty old man. But we did not really meet until 1973 when I was heading corporate social responsibility programs at Avon and he was still at Chase. Both of us in a field generated by the work of my father. Francesco went on to be an innovator and leader in the field in 4 divisions of Federated Department Stores, and his career in corporate social responsibility ultimately spanning over 35 years. Also in my life, my mother taught me to love reading and music and art. An educator herself, she taught at Spelman College while Daddy was dean of the Atlanta University School of Social Work. After Daddy's death in 1971, she was offered the chance to serve on 2 corporate boards, New York Life and Philip Morris, which was pretty pioneering at that time. She was the conscience on those boards, but she was also able to connect this role with her ever-present love of the arts. She served on the boards of Lincoln Center and the Metropolitan Museum. She advocated for the careers of people like Leontine Price at the Metropolitan Opera and Romare Bearden at the Metropolitan Museum. When the Vatican sought a home for its exhibit in the 1980s, Mother brought together the Metropolitan Museum and Philip Morris to bring this gift to the city. As I said, I'm a very lucky woman. Influenced by these 3 people, I am now an educator with a doctorate that focuses on American business. I consult for schools in the CUNY system, where Francesco was once a trustee. But the tradition continues. My son Mark once served several years on the National Urban League Board. My stepdaughter Mara is a fundraising consultant whose clients include the Africa America Institute, on whose board my father served. My stepson Mick is a freelance photographer who is the ad hoc photographer for the New York City Rescue Mission. And recently, my 8-year-old grandson said that he wants to be a community helper when he grows up. Through this event today and the presence of my parents' papers, which are housed here at Columbia, we hope that you too will learn about and be inspired by Whitney and Margaret Young and Francesco Cantarella. It is fitting that this event is sponsored by Chase Bank and that our inaugural speaker will be Michael Chen from NBC, where his portfolio includes advocacy for education. While his full bio is in the conference program, we are excited to be able to see a short video on his hallmark program, Education Nation. Thank you all for allowing us to honor this family in this very special and appropriate way.
We're hosting this multi-day summit here at Rockefeller Plaza in New York called Education Nation.
It is our week-long look into the state of our country's education system.
Every platform of NBC News is in the midst of deep and substantive reporting on educational issues.
There has never been a time in America when education is a more critical issue.
We are very interested in getting teachers all across the country into this conversation.
Ellie, good morning. What's your question for President Obama?
I wanted to know whether you think that Malia and Sasha would get the same high-quality, rigorous education in a DC public school as compared to their very elite private academy that they're attending now.
I'll be blunt with you. The answer is no right now. I saw a revolution that you helped start. How do we spread that from Harlem across America?
The real important issue is if we don't fix this, we will not remain a great country. It is impossible.
The whole education system is not broken, but there are roughly 2,000 schools in America that are broken, and they're in communities that tend to be broken.
We can have great teachers in every single classroom. If parents aren't part of the solution, we are never going to get where we need to go as a country.
I wanted to spend some time researching what the most impactful ways would be to improve the education system in the country, and after a lot of research decided that the best way to do it would be to invest in these two guys.
At first I didn't want to do anything because I was always down, but now I actually want to be a teacher, and I want to work here.
At this school? More and more schools are seeing technology as more than just a subject to teach, but also a tool to help students become better learners.
I want to talk specifically about what is really at the core of this debate, which is how do we make sure we get the very best teachers in front of our students?
These contracts are getting in the way of helping our kids.
Are Americans getting their money's worth in education?
Here the lessons are taught through games.
This year, we're even more committed by taking Education Nation on the road. We kicked off our tour right here in Chicago.
And we're broadcasting live on Chicago nonstop and streaming on educationnation.com.
What this is here basically is a dialogue that is starting across the country about the state of education and what we can do in order to improve it.
There's nothing wrong with the Chicago school system that cannot be fixed by what's right with the Chicago school system.
Today is your opportunity to speak your mind.
People think that teachers just want to have the summer off, and we still work through the summer. We work through the night. We dream about our kids.
I wanted to be here to join you, to really energize all of us, to stand up and say we want to be part of the solution.
We're inside the exhibit here at Education Nation, and it's all about this. Future.
Talk about the issues and the problems here. Where do you begin?
If you put all the money into a bucket, on average in the state of California, we invest about $7,000 a year in a student. We invest about $58,000 a year in a prisoner. There's something radically wrong with that math.
Education Nation will be back here in New York from September 25th to October 1st, 2011. And if anything, education is a bigger issue this year than it was when we first started this last year. We'll continue to shine a light on the issues that affect education in America and the improvement of our school systems. Because at NBC News, we strive to make America once again the education nation of our world.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Marcia. I'm delighted to be here today. Well, it's kind of anticlimactic. I heard there's a Nobel Peace Prize winner before me, so somehow I'm going to fall short of expectations. I grew up in sales, and generally, you know what? You want to lower the expectation and exceed them. I don't know how I can exceed the expectations after what happened this morning. But anyway, I'm still delighted to be here with you. This is my hometown. This is where I grew up. Actually, not only my hometown, my home neighborhood. I grew up a block away. Do you know where Claremont Avenue is? For 40 years, my parents lived on Claremont Avenue, and when I was growing up, until I went to college, I lived on Claremont Avenue, 21 Claremont Avenue, apartment number 62. So this is my stomping ground, and I'm proud to be here. And even though I went on to school in upstate New York, University of Rochester, and then Cornell for my business school, Columbia Business School holds a special place for me as well. Sounds like there's some people upstate New York as well over there. But Columbia Business School holds a place for me as well, because that's where my wife went to, business school, right here in Columbia a few years ago. I won't say how long ago, but a few years ago. So it's a special place for me, and I'm glad to be here. What I want to do today is just talk a little bit about what we're doing at NBC News around Education Nation. NBC News, as you know, consists of many properties. We have the Today Show, #1 rated, Nightly News with Brian Williams. We have MSNBC, the cable channel, Meet the Press on the weekend, and Dateline. And we will actually be rolling out another primetime news show with Brian Williams later this month. So we've got a lot of properties. And people think of a news organization as, well, you're supposed to report the news. Yes, that's what we do. We report on politics, mainly on MSNBC. We also report on events overseas, on the wars, on the tsunami, on the assassination of Osama bin Laden. We also report on events that you guys want to hear about, the trial of Amanda Knox, what's going on with Michael Jackson. We also report on what's going on in the fun with celebrities. Kim Kardashian was on Today's Show this morning. Jennifer Garner, those people as well. But at some point, I think NBC News and all the media organizations got to stand for more than just reporting news. I think us as a media organization have a civic and social responsibility to help our country. Because at the end of the day, media is where a lot of people see and the spectrum of what is going on in our country, in our local communities, and that impacts the future of where we take this country. And so Education Nation is our initiative to address what I think is a national crisis, and what many of my colleagues do as well. And that is the state of education today in America. And although we do not take an opinion on how to fix education in America, we are taking a stand that improving education in America is good for all of us. And our goal, as you heard Brian Williams says, is to make sure that we continue to raise the dialogue until one day America becomes the education nation of the world again. So with that, let me just quickly, thank you. Yeah. So do you guys know where this is, by the way? This is a picture taken of what we just did in our second annual summit of this year on Education Nation. Anybody know where this is? Ice rink, yeah. So what we did is we covered up the ice rink, we put a big tent over it, there's Prometheus, and we had our big conference right in the ice rink at 30 Rock, Rockefeller Center, and we just finished it last week. So this is the first presentation that anybody's seen about how we did at the Education Nation Summit last week. So bear with me, because you know what? Trial and error, we'll do better next time. How do I, is this thing, okay. So I'm not going to go through a lot of words. It's Friday afternoon. I'm going to leave lots of time for questions and answers. But you saw, we started this in 2010, right? And the whole point was we wanted to create a dialogue on education, engage thought leaders. We created a gallery for people to see and touch and feel about education. So it's not only about education in America, but educating the public about what's going on in education in America. And we're covering the issues online and on air. If you watch NBC News and any of our shows, you'll see whenever we talk about education, it's always under the banner Education Nation. And so this year, as you saw, we went on the road, we went to 3 cities, and then we finished off with our ultimate summit again this past week in New York City. Maybe I can, I don't know if this is working. Okay, thank you. So the landscape, let me just spend a minute on this, because this is probably the most important chart. Is why are we in a crisis situation? Why is education so important for us as the media to talk about it? 68% of our 8th graders are not proficient in reading. And if you think about science and math, the numbers are just as bad. 67% are not proficient in math, 72% are not proficient in science. You gotta stay on the same page. Okay, can you go back? You gotta go back. Yeah, stay on that page. I'll cue you to change pages, okay? Since this thing doesn't seem to be working. Okay. So when you have an issue when 70% are not proficient in the 3 core subjects, there's a challenge. And because of that, 28% of high school students fail to graduate on time. And you know what that means? A lot of people say, well, that's too bad. Let me talk a little bit about high school dropouts. Every high school dropout costs us, and in business school you probably understand this, I came from a finance background as well, $290,000 of taxpayer money. Also, lost income potential of that person of about $630,000. There's 1.2 million dropouts annually. If you do the math on that, that's $7.6 billion of lost income due to high school dropouts. If you calculate it over the course of the lifetime, that's $335 billion over the course of a lifetime for 1 year's worth of students dropping out of high school. That's big numbers. But also on top of that, 65% of people that are in jail are high school dropouts. 1 out of every 4 high school dropouts is likely to get incarcerated over their lifetime. 47 times more likely a high school dropout is going to go to jail than someone with a college degree. That's staggering. That's some of the issues that our country's faced with. And For women, 9 times more likely to be a single mom if they're a high school dropout than with a college degree. So those are some of the things that, when you think about why high school and having kids stay in high school and then going on to college is important, because it impacts us directly. 1/3 aren't college ready when they graduate. That's $5.4 billion that costs us to do remedial education for these students over the course of their 4-year college. A lot of that translate into our future, our economy. And as you hear today, all the presidential candidates are talking about jobs, jobs. We need jobs, right? Everyone needs jobs. But what's shocking is some presidential candidates don't talk about education at all, because you can't disconnect education from jobs. There's 3.3 million jobs today, 3.3 million jobs today that go unfulfilled because of a skills mismatch, right? So guess what happens to these jobs? When they're looking to hire people and there's not the right skills for it, what do you think happens to those jobs? Goes overseas, right? So sometimes it goes overseas not because it's lower cost. That might have been the case 10, 15, 20 years ago. But jobs are going overseas because the skill set mismatch in this country. Because education systems in other countries have churned out people more ready for the workforce in this global environment today than our workforce in America. And as you can see, what that means is we are now ranked 25th in math, which is below average, 17th in science, and 14th in literacy. That's out of 34 countries, economically developed countries. 25th out of 34th is not that good. And so part of what we're trying to do is at NBC is raise the dialogue. Education has always been a conversation among educators who talk about this issue. Our goal is to take it out of the shadows and bring in the spotlight and make mainstream America be aware of this problem, this issue in education, and make the public know that it's everyone's issue and we all got to come together to try to find an answer for that. Switch pages. Thank you. So here's the mission. Without reading the words, 4 things we want to do at NBC News. One is we want to be the place to be for accurate information on what's going on in education, to be the #1 most reliable place for statistics, data, and how we can improve education in America. Second place, as you saw in the summit, is to be a place where solutions can happen, where we give a forum for great ideas, for innovations, and for solutions to our education problem. Third thing is to mainstream the conversation, like I said, take it out of the shadows and bring in the spotlight. And fourth, we want to continue the dialogue, not just during the summit, but on air, online, and by doing that, also give people a chance to pitch in. How can they help? How can they get involved? Both at the local level as well as the national level. That's our goal at NBC News with Education Nation. Next page. Does it work? Yeah, great, thank you. All right, good. So this is on the road. We took it to Chicago, Philly, and LA. We started off in Chicago and drew a map just, to educate myself on all the 50 states. We started off in Chicago, Illinois, went to LA, and then we went back and finished in Philadelphia. So we kind of went across the country. And what we did on the road was we did a few things. We did the teacher town hall, ribbon cutting. I'll go through all those and why. We did a teacher town hall, which is a 2-hour discussion with teachers about how can we improve what's going on in the classroom. We started off last year. Did anyone see the movie Waiting for Superman? Yeah, so Waiting for Superman was done last year's summit. And the feedback we got was too much about, what's a good teacher, what's a bad teacher, right? Well, yeah, we all know that there might be a small percentage of bad teachers, like there's a small percentage of bad students, a small percentage of bad employees in the corporate world. But let's not focus on that small percentage. Let's focus on propping up teachers, giving them the skills they can be to be even better teachers. Because at the end of the day, 60% of the student achievement is tied to teachers. And teachers are the most trusted voice in education. So instead of focusing on the 2 or 3% or less, that may not meet standards, let's focus on the 98, 99% of the teachers that do great work, and how can we take them to the next level? So we gave them a voice, engaged the teachers. That's the first thing we did. The second thing we did is we had a civic ribbon cutting ceremony. And why do we want to do that? Because we want to engage the mayors, the superintendents in this dialogue. Because at the end of the day, teaching and education is connected to the local municipalities. We also had a Job One panel. We brought CEOs in and business leaders to connect what skill sets they need and how do we get the students the kind of skills they need so that they can enter the workforce today. Dave Barger, JetBlue, was just with us, and he talked about what the skill sets are needed for a global economy today. We had people from the military, General Casey from the Army, who also talked about what military is an option, so that you have other options other than a 4-year college after high school. You can go to 2-year college, you can go to vocational studies, you can go to the military, many options. Just the encouragement is to stay in school, to do something, and keep learning after high school. We also had an education experience open to the public the whole week, and that's to kind of showcase and interact with people, as you saw. And again, our promise is to engage the media, to do it on air and online throughout the year. So this is kind of the experience. People can go in, they can watch, and they can learn about what kind of jobs pay how much. They also can learn about the state of education for themselves using interactive tools and technology. They also can learn from themselves by taking a quiz on what kind of learner are you. Are you a learner that learns like with groups by yourself? Are you a learner by listening? Are you a learner by visual hearing? By visual experiencing? Or are you a learner by thinking about things? Are you a quantitative learner? Or are you a qualitative learner? All that stuff we put into the experience in Chicago, LA, and Philadelphia. And we also engage our MSNBC, our politics team on this. Chris Matthews, Andrew Mitchell, because at the end of the day, education isn't just about business leaders and civic leaders. It is, and it should be, a discussion as we talk about politics as we come to this election year. And without getting our political leaders engaged in this discussion, I don't think education and the state of education can change dramatically without getting our leaders at the federal and state levels engaged. Okay, so on top of that, what do? We can't just be there about shining a spotlight. We also need to do our own fair share. And so we came up with this product called NBC Learn. And what NBC Learn is we take all our archival data from NBC News. We have about 80 years of archival data. We digitize them, and we put them online. We put them online so that we can share with the schools, both higher education and K through 12. We have over 10,000 videos that now is online. 10,000 videos, that's amazing. And it's correlated to 50 state standards and the Common Core requirements. It includes subjects like biology, physics, math, history, chemistry, marketing, finance. So you can almost learn about any subject. And this is not to replace textbook learning, it's not to replace teachers in the classroom. It's to use it to supplement the teachers and the students with their learning so they can actually experience what they're talking about in the class. And we did a little pilot, and 92% of this pilot in Texas, 92% of the teachers says that using NBC Learn actually made it more fun and more productive in the classroom for the students. You know, we had a little fun with it too. So we teamed up with the NSF and the National Science Foundation, and we created some kind of, excuse me, just getting over a cold. We were doing the summit ourselves last couple weeks. I was living in a hotel for 2 weeks, so this is kind of my body saying you got to take a little break. But and I'm sure some of these organizers here, their bodies may wear down after today as well. So I know what you're going through, but congratulations. But anyway, so we had a little fun with it. So we did some original content stuff with the National Science Foundation on chemistry, with Martin Luther King, on changing the planet, on the Olympics, and also the NFL. Given that the NFL season is in prime form, I want to give you an example of what we could showcase in the classroom. So one video I'm going to show in about a second is on Newton's first law of motion. You guys know what Newton's first law of motion is? Who knows who? Nobody knows Newton's first law. I got to go back to until, exactly, some force, an outside force, exactly, right? An object in motion stays in motion at the same velocity unless some outside force changes that, all right? So we're going to learn about that through a video of NFL football. Here we go.
Whether it's a running back breaking through the secondary or a wide receiver on a foot race for the end zone, most defensive players in the NFL have a single goal in mind: to get downfield as far and as fast as possible.
We're thinking, wow, I've got to get from A to B within a certain time frame, and I can't let this guy throw me off track. So it's kind of like a chess match at that point in time. It's the battle to see who's the toughest.
Defenders, on the other hand, have a different goal: to stand in the way of the offensive player and stop his forward progress.
When you're coming in and making a tackle, you've got to come in and you've got to stop him right there on the dime.
Who wins this epic battle between the ball carrier and the defender? Newton's first law of motion helps supply some answers.
Newton's first law says that if an object is at rest, it requires an unbalanced force to make it not be at rest. Or similarly, if an object is in motion, it tends to stay in motion in a straight line at a constant velocity unless an unbalanced force acts on it.
In football, we see unbalanced forces whenever one player exerts a force on another and causes him to change his direction and or speed.
So imagine that a quarterback is just taking a snap from the center, and a lineman gets free from the opposing team that's coming from the other side, and when they collide, you can see an unbalanced force acting on the quarterback, driving him across the field in the direction of the charging lineman. That's about as unbalanced as it gets.
In physics, a player's natural resistance to that unbalanced force is something called inertia.
On the football field, you can think about inertia as being a running back who's already in motion, doesn't want to change the fact that it's already in motion. So it's going to take some external unbalanced force, i.e. a defensive player, to stop that running back.
Consider former New Orleans Saints running back Deuce McAllister, who at 6'1", 231 pounds, used his inertia when running to make him hard to tackle.
The size of the player is important to the concept of inertia because higher mass means more inertia.
But a player's mass is different from his weight. Mass is a measure of how much matter an object has, while weight is a measure of how strongly an object's mass is attracted by gravity.
So, for example, a body on Earth would have the same mass as that body on the moon, but it would weigh less on the moon because gravity is less on the moon than it is on Earth.
NFL players with more mass have more inertia and are harder to move off their path. This concept even works on a quarterback sneak, when a quarterback uses the combined mass of his entire offensive line to gain a yard or two.
If you've got an offensive line that can overpower the defensive line, that's just what you do. You get on their hip and you just fall, and you just ride that wave forward.
In the NFL, whenever players go head-to-head, it's Newton's first law of motion that helps determine who will win the battle of the gridiron.
So that's using technology to help learn. Isn't that a little bit more fun if you see a little video instead of just reading by rote memorization? Right? Now, I've learned something. You know, when I watch football this Sunday with my kids, and they love football, and a linebacker at 250 pounds goes 4-4 into a running back, I'm going to tell my 9-year-old kid, that's an unbalanced force that you just saw. All right? All right, well, anyway, this is what we were doing at NBC Learn, and one last thing I want to go back is, in addition to educating high schools, middle schools, and colleges, we decided we want to get the word out there faster. So we partner up with our sponsors. And to put on an event like that, to do this archive stuff, we do need sponsors to help us out. The University of Phoenix, Honda, the Kellogg Foundation, they've all helped us out get these NBC Learn out to the K-12 schools in Chicago, LA, Philadelphia, in Detroit, and in Delaware for free. So we partner with these sponsors. We jointly donated subscriptions to all those 5 cities, every single middle and high school in those cities, so that for these schools, and a lot of these schools are in high poverty areas, can have the same opportunity to learn with video. And this is not something that you have to have a big budget in order to pay for it. So, and our goal is to continue to work with sponsors to get these out in key urban areas for free. as part of our civic responsibility at NBC News with the foundations to help accelerate the learning of our students. So you just saw it. We just had our summit September 25th to October 1st. I'm going to do a little quiz. People know who they are? Who's on the left? Joe Scarborough and Mika, right? We all know who, right, is in the kind of in the middle. Jeb Bush. And who's on the right? Cory Book of Newark. Very good. So what I want to do, again, because it's Friday afternoon, rather than tell you what happened at the summit, because it just happened, just show you kind of a closing reel that we did of what happened last week. So if you could play this video, you can tell we're really video focused here at NBC News. Let's play the video. You know who she is?
A special broadcast from New York.
This is not a skill problem. This is a will problem.
Good afternoon and welcome. You might have noticed the temperature. Last year it was rain. This year it's Manila, the Philippines. We are talking to teachers in this room and across the country.
2,600 people have dialed into our line.
We as teachers don't know what these children are going home to. When you come into my classroom, I need you up here because I'm not going to lower the bar for you.
A great teacher is what changes the trajectory of a student.
Quick show of hands, how many of you, of the teachers in the room, spend out-of-pocket money?
Right now, we're ranked 14th in literacy, 17th in science, and 25th in math. That's just not good enough.
It stimulates people to question what we've been doing and whether we should be doing something different.
There's a complacency here in this country that we're trying to fight against.
It's like going to battle. You get everything you need to help win that battle, and then you win the war. What motivates you more than anything else?
That special moment, and you see the light bulb come on.
You hit home with me with these kids. It's not about money. It's about the time and the support system.
I was ready to pack up my kids and say, we got to get out of here. But I'm from Detroit. I love my city, and I believe that the diligence in this group is what's making the difference.
As a Latino, when I see the high school dropout rates in the Hispanic community, 17.6% dropout rate, I'm embarrassed.
Last year, the event was confrontational. This year feels more solution-oriented.
I believe that parents are the most dynamic force in education in America, but it's also one of the most underutilized. Parents must take over schools.
10 state governors. This is the largest gathering outside the National Governors Association focused on one subject.
You get what you pay for.
You cannot cut education by $1 billion and expect to keep good teachers in the classroom.
I feel huge urgency. I feel we are absolutely being outcompeted by other countries today. We can break through, but we can't keep doing business as usual.
We're live from Education Nation.
We're not putting what's in the best interest of our children. I specifically want. I'm going to draw it out of you, Cory.
Draw it out of me.
I want specifically to know, why would that school cheat the students and fire the two best teachers that that principal had?
Because, well, first of all, don't blame it on the school. That principal's
I'm not blaming it on the school.
Here.
I'm waiting for you to blame it on somebody.
Former First Lady Laura Bush. It's never over. It's something we have to work on every year.
Charter schools represent right now 4% of the children in this country. 96% of the children in this country are being neglected.
She's wrong. The reason that we have to have the private investors in ideas like charter schools is that the unions have done everything possible to stop public education dollars from innovating.
Innovation is the key as we move forward in education.
Here's the winner of the City Innovation and Education Prize Class Dojo.
Welcome to our panel, A Matter of Degrees. We have done a beautiful job of educating elites in our country, but that's not the game anymore.
I don't want people to hide behind the poverty issue and point fingers at poverty. We really need all of our kids to have a shot at a great education.
Things changed for me when I was in 8th grade, and all it took was one teacher.
Miss Murphy, if you're listening, thank you very much.
You see, everybody has dreams, and everybody has the capacity to get close to those dreams anyway. And there are some remarkable examples of schools whose children have performed very well in extremely poor areas.
Will enough of our country's leaders and citizens decide we're going to step up and make this happen? And I think Education Nation is helping make the answer to that question, yes.
Thank you. And we had some great, as you know, sponsors were there. University of Phoenix, State Farm, Microsoft. We had foundations that were helping us out. Bezos Foundation from Amazon, the Gates Foundation, Broad Foundation, the Kellogg Foundation. They were great. And also, as you saw, one of your sponsors, Citi, helped create an innovation challenge for us this year as well, which was fascinating to do innovation. So we had an opportunity to have 3 different groups come in and pitch their innovation in the classroom, and Citi helped give a prize for that. And the Target as well did the same thing. They came in and focused on race, poverty, and education, because you really can't disconnect race, poverty, and education. Because there's a study that says that about 19% of kids live in a poverty household. And their statistics, if you look at the statistics, their statistics are twice as bad as some of the kids that don't come from a low poverty house. For example, we had said 68% aren't proficient. Well, it's like 84, 85% aren't proficient from a poverty household. So we've got to kind of find a way not only to resolve the education issue, but how do you realize that there's bigger challenges for students, our kids who come from a low-income housing, who live below the poverty line, or immigrants who have a challenge with English as the first language. And so those are some of the things that we don't have the answers for, but those are things we're saying we want to raise a dialogue and have all of you help us find solutions for that. And we have a lot of properties. I'm not going to go through all that, but NBC News, along with our NBC Universal affiliates, are all engaged on how do we raise the profile of these issues. You saw some of the key people that were there. We've also shown some windows on great teaching. We went to schools in Florida, in Kansas, and California to showcase teachers that do great things in the classroom. We had a students panel you saw. We also had a parents panel, because parents are a key part of the discussion. And I would say the one other key thing that we really focused on this year is early childhood development. That if kids are not giving the stimulation and learning even before they go to kindergarten, 83% of those kids will be behind by the time they get to 3rd grade. So the kids' future many times is determined, and their success and their outcomes are determined even before they step in a classroom. So what are we going to do? In 2012, we're going to continue the conversation. We're going to go back on the road. We had 53 million television viewers this year. We had 800,000 teacher town hall viewers. And so this is covered widely by us, by our affiliates. We have over 220 affiliates. And our affiliates, if you guys don't know what affiliates are NBC, not necessarily owned stations, but stations that represent NBC across the country. So it wasn't just NBC News that was involved, but of our 220 affiliates, 194 got engaged and broadcast stories about education, and we had over 1,800 stories from our affiliates across the country on Education Nation. Won't spend a lot of time on this, but we also have it online, so if you get a chance, go to educationnation.com. You can see all the videos of all the panels from the summit on educationnation.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook as well. And the amazing thing is we had over 1.6 million impressions online, as well as another 1.2 million impressions on our affiliate stations. And the reach of our summit reached over 15.6 million Twitter users over the last course of the last week. As you saw, we also had the Plaza that was up at 30 Rock that showcased education. And our educationnation.com is a place where not only are we broadcasting stuff about what happened in the summit, but we're giving tools and resources, parenting tools, learning tools for students. How do you get engaged? How can you raise your hand and help out your community? Teacher essay contest, make it a place for teachers to get engaged and have fun and tell us great stories about what's going on in their classroom. And finally, we've also had a lot of guests, key guests on educationnation.com where you can carry on a conversation, ask them questions. Secretary Arnie Duncan, Dennis Van Rocco, who's the president of the Teachers Union of the National Education Association, Tom Brokaw, John Daisy, Rahm Emanuel, as you can see, a list of people that have been on, including Governor O'Malley, who's the governor of Maryland that you heard about. You can't cut $1.2 billion out of education and still be committed to it. So that's kind of our wrap-up. For 2012, like I said, we're going to continue the dialogue. Our dialogue is we're going to have another summit next year in September. We're going to continue on-air commitment throughout the year on all our NBC channels. Additional on the road, we haven't decided what cities we're going to go to, but there's a lot of cities. I was out in California, and they're pushing for us to do one in San Francisco. Washington, D.C. is looking to do it. We're going to explore where the best opportunities for us to make a difference, and we're going to go back on the road this coming year. And we're going to have a larger online presence. As you saw, you can follow us on educationnation.com. I'm going to start Twittering. By the way, I thought I was too old to Twitter. You know, I've been in the business for 25 years. I went this past week to San Francisco, where the co-founder of Twitter, Biz Stone, created a nonprofit with Ray Ramsey, founder of One Economy. They created a nonprofit to focus on three things: early childhood learning, STEM education, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, and health literacy. And so when I went over there and I was at this small gathering, and I'm with the co-founder of Twitter, I said, you know what? I can't be pushing education without me personally learning how to Twitter out about what's going on in education. So I just started it this week, but I have my own handle. It's Michael Chen NBC. So if you want to follow me, you can follow me at Michael Chen NBC and give me your critiques of what we're doing in education as well. So with that, let me open up for some questions. We have time for questions? You have 10 minutes? Yeah, let me open up for any questions on Education Nation. Or anything about education. I'm sorry? Can you? Yeah. Yeah, so great question. So there's two parts of it. There's NBC Learn, right, which is we kind of package the content for schools, for higher ed and for K through 12. And that's our kind of program where we've gone out and kind of donated some of that, but it's also for subscription to other schools, you know, and there's a pilot trial period, so if Columbia Business School wants to try NBC Learn, we will pilot it and allow the school to use it for all the students in the faculty for a certain time period. On top of that, we have 80 years worth of archival footage. And there are people and companies that want to license those footage out. And we have a group called NBC Archives that actually licenses out full footage for use for whoever, corporations, foundations, and any other purposes. And I can get you in touch with the right person to handle NBC Archives as well on that. Yes?
As you are talking about corporate social responsibility
Yes.
and how it's the responsibility of the media, are you guys going to do any type of case studies or with this like infusion of supplementary learning to kind of see the cause and effect in certain school districts or schools of how this is helping?
So great question. So the question that was asked is, as we're doing this social responsibility, are we going to do any case studies to look at schools to see if we're making any impact, right, with Education Nation, if it's going to actually improve. The answer is we haven't started yet, but we are starting. We're going to do an impact study with the Aspen Institute to study, for example, now that we've done Education Nation this year, are politicians using the word education more in social media? Are people talking in the media about education and improving education in America? So we are going to do a study on that, at that level. Are we driving brand awareness? Are we driving public awareness of the issues in education. That's the first step, and I think we'll have that in the next month or two to see if Education Nation is raising the profile of education issues in America. I will tell you that since our event on education, 2 different district school systems, one in Mississippi and I don't remember the other place, got motivated by that they're having their own quote-unquote education summit, where they have their school come in, the teachers, the students, the local community, talk about education and how they can improve their local communities. And they sent a note saying, you've inspired us to have these local dialogues, because we can't get to every single local community. We're going to hit 3 or 4 cities, but if each local town, each local school district says, you know what, I'm going to have a gathering like this and bring the right constituents together, parents, because parents need to be part of the discussion, the community, the politicians, and talk about issues that we just talked about, early childhood, K through 12, teaching and testing. How do you develop great teachers? How do you keep students in school, right? Which is something Marcia is passionate about. How do you finish college? How do you prevent them from dropping out? Things like that. How can we give them a healthy meal? How can we keep them safe at school? I think all that stuff, yes, the answer is we should start studying it, but this is only our 2nd year, and the schools are only starting to become aware of how important this issue is, and how by bringing people together, you don't have to agree on all the solutions, but you bring people together and you spend time talking about this issue, I guarantee you it's going to improve over time. But that's a great thing, and we will plan on maybe doing 2 or 3 kind of case studies next year as well. Good, back, yep, right there. Okay.
I was hoping to ask, because it seems in the world of community development, the conversation about public education has overlooked kind of the makeup of the communities that we have.
Yeah.
And so in underserved areas where we still have such racially segregated communities, and just wondering kind of with this Education Nation discussion, what the plans might be to start to talk about some of those broader social trends, and how in terms of reforming public education, we also need to think about what our communities look like and what the opportunities for the people who live in those communities looks like.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So part of our, and I would go, there was 2 sections on Education Nation, our summit, that talked about that. One that we showcased Detroit. As you know, Detroit is really challenged, and the whole community of Detroit has been a conversation. There was actually a video called A National Disgrace that Dan Rather did, talking about the school system in Detroit and the community, and how we have to fix Detroit, and how we can fix Detroit the way New Orleans was significantly improved, after the hurricane. We also had another panel on race, poverty, and education, and how the community has to come together to fix some of these issues. I will say, though, however, that I don't want to bite off, and NBC News doesn't want to bite off more than it can chew, right? So I think the first step we want to do is how do we raise the dialogue and have the smart people, which is not necessarily the people at NBC News, although we do have a lot of smart people, I'm not sure it's necessarily me, but there's a lot of talented people across the country that can speak about education and can gather in much greater form and have much more time and expertise around than we can. Our goal at NBC News is to give them a platform for providing solutions. And I would say the bigger social challenge of the communities around it, it's part of the education issue, but I would say that's a local discussion issue. So Detroit is totally different than Chicago, which is totally different than LA, which is totally different than Philadelphia. So the goal is to rally the nation at a grassroots level to talk about their own local communities and how can they solve it. And by us continuing to shine the spotlight on air with our TV shows about education and showcasing it, hopefully there'll be imitation of this going around the country. Right? Great, thank you. Yes.
Hi. So I would imagine as a news organization that it could be challenging to take a stand on education, but also remain politically reasonably balanced. Is that something that's come up? And if so, how have you navigated that?
That's a great question. So here's the key that we talked about. Our first goal is to shine a spotlight on this issue. And the stand we're taking is that there's a national crisis around education, and we stand for education and improving education in America. Right? So that is our stance. Now, as a news organization, like I said, we're not coming up with what is the right answer, because I think that's not our role. Our role is to provide voices for every side of the argument. Just like we provide voices on the political spectrum, from the liberals to the conservatives, we provided voices. There was a debate between Jeffrey Canada and Diane Ravitch, and they sit on opposite sides of the spectrum on education reform. But we gave them a platform to talk about what they think can be done to improve education in America. I don't think anybody out there saying let's keep the status quo, nothing's broke. So what we're saying is, if you don't think, if you care about our country and you care about improving the education system in America, then join us for this dialogue. And we want you to showcase solutions. Don't just talk about problems, but showcase solutions. So, and Brian Williams, I think, said it great. He goes, he was proud that NBC News stands for something and stands for education. That doesn't necessarily say that we have the one answer, or we will even recommend what the right answer is. So there's a difference between having a stand and taking a specific opinion on something. And I don't think we've crossed that line. I think we're taking a stand on education, but we haven't said what is the right solution. There's many solutions, and I don't know if there is one right one. Yeah.
Just a couple of things. First, there was one troubling little statistic in one of the slides. 28% of kids don't graduate on time, and 68% of kids don't read at grade level, which means that 40% of our graduates don't read at grade level. So that was a little bit spooky. But my real question is...
well, that's correct, yeah.
I heard Laura Bush say that this is not a short-term problem. It's not going to rest, so we can't. Do you guys at NBC feel that you have the resources to put in, shall we say, an Afghanistan-length commitment to this? Next year, if one of the problems here is the American attention span. Sorry, if I'm robbing you of yours. But if the advertisers get tired of this next year because the populace gets tired of this next year, brick in the wall comes back or something, are you guys going to stay the course? Can you?
Yeah, so the great question. Let me answer. There's two parts of it. One is, you're right, 68% aren't reading grade level, 28% don't graduate on time. There's a certain people that graduate on time that aren't reading at grade level. And that's why there's remedial. When they go to college, there's another 25, 30% that need to take remedial courses, because when they go to college, they're not college ready. So people graduate a degree that have to take a step back when they go to college. And that's a big challenge. And I said, that's like $5.6 billion it's costing us for each class of people, of students who are not ready for college. So that's an issue. So that's the first point. Are we ready to stay the course? I will say, I know my boss, who's the head of NBC News, and I am personally committed to stay the course as long as we have an education crisis in America. And our goal is to return America to become the education nation of the world. Now, we are not a nonprofit, so you raise a great question. So we do need sponsors and support from it. And we have had great sponsors. And I mentioned some of our sponsors this year to go with this journey. I would say some of the foundations are in it for the long haul. Many of our sponsors I know aren't here for a year or two and moving on to another subject. I feel really good that there is enough corporate foundations who are with us in this journey, and they understand that they can't be successful as a global company and compete if they don't help us fix this issue. So I can't imagine funding going away. But yes, the answer is we do need funding. We're not looking to make this a big business, but we are looking for, obviously, to have sponsors help us put this and make it a sustainable thing on Education Nation, not only for the next year and the year after, but until we see actual improvement in this country. Okay, so thank you. One last question? Yeah.
Yes, you mentioned the importance of communities rallying together for education. One of the kind of critical things that I've seen that I think NBC News can support because of your media outreach is to address the misdirection of a lot of allocation of funds. For example, I live in Philadelphia. A few years ago, there was a major ballot issue whether to fix the schools or put $2 billion in public stadiums. You know, I really think it's important that our media be able to be used in a manner that we educate the public as to what the conditions of those schools are, so these parents who are now in a position to be active and advocates of their children understand the gravity of the situation, so that they are not voting for 2 stadiums, you know, at $2 billion, instead of, you know, addressing major needs in public schools. Can you speak to that issue?
Yeah, I think as a news organization, we have responsibility to, again, raise the dialogue and profile of key issues in the local communities. At NBC News, we are more of a national news organization, but we have 220 affiliates. So if there's a local issue at a local area where we have an affiliate that can carry it, we absolutely will, look at it. There's no promises. The news organization have editorial final say on whether or not it is a news story. And if it is a news story that we think we should carry, and then there's been news stories around in Atlanta and Washington, D.C. with testing, and we've carried that on TV, and we've carried national stories, even of our sponsors when there's a concern around them. So our job, there's a separation of church and state. As much as we want to do this on Education Nation, there's another group of people that on all our shows who says, if this is newsworthy and there's issues around education that we got to raise and profile, then we'll do it. And so we will continue to do that. That's what we've always been doing. But it's all going to be done now under the banner of Education Nation, if it's on education. So everyone understand that we have a mission and initiative to improve education in this country. So thank you. So let me just wrap up. So thank you for your time. Let me just wrap up with a personal story. Like I told you, I grew up here. My personal story on education started 60 years ago when my parents immigrated from China here. And when they immigrated here, they basically didn't have any money. But they found the power of an education. My father went to Michigan. My mother came to Columbia. And actually, my father got his PhD here at Columbia as well. So it's a Columbia, and my mother worked here in the administration in Columbia. So my roots come from here. And we lived in rent-subsidized housing. My parents lived in for 40 years on Claremont Avenue, 21 Claremont Avenue, number 62. And they lived there until, and I remember it because that's where they lived. That's the only place they ever lived for 42 years until 8 years ago when in the 80s they couldn't take care of themselves anymore. And I moved them in with my family up in Connecticut, and where my mother lived with us for 4 years before she passed away, and before my father, who passed away earlier this year, who lived with us for 8 years with my kids and my wife. And the only thing I would say is my memories of my dad and my mom is that they sacrificed everything for my education. And I wouldn't be where I was today without their sacrifices. Every penny that they earned, that's all they did for my sister and my education. And I wouldn't have had the opportunity if they didn't give me a great education, not only in high school, but in college and beyond. And so as I think about, and I do still think about it often, my father passed away in March, I still think about how do I carry on the legacy of what my parents did. And there was nothing I could do to pay them back other than let them live the last few years of their lives with their family where they wanted to be. And I would just pass on to you guys just 3 things that I would say it's important to me. And one is to remember that life isn't fair, right? Because any day, anything could happen. I mean, life wasn't fair to a certain extent, Steve Jobs, by shortening his life. But he lived a great life, all right? And I teach my kids that you have to learn that life isn't always fair, it wasn't meant to be. You got to make the most of it. And my 9-year-old, to a quick story, when he was getting beat up by his 3 older brothers, and he was complaining to me about how it isn't fair, he's getting beat up all the time. And I said to him, well, life isn't fair. You're the smallest of your 3, of the 4 brothers, so you kind of got to find a way around it, I can't make you bigger. I got to go to work, I can't protect you the whole time. It is what it is. And it was amazing. This was when he was 5 years old. He's 9 now. It's amazing how he uses his charm, okay, and his personality to curry favor with his brothers. And they all are afraid of him now, where they always will do what he wants to do. And one day he came up to me and said, Dad, I want you to play video games with me. And I said, I'm sorry, I got to do work today. He goes, but Dad, I just finished my homework and I got 2 hours where I want to play video games. I said, well, I can't do it. He goes, that's not fair, Dad. I said, remember what I told you? Life isn't fair. He thought about it for a second. You're right, Dad. Life isn't fair. I learned a lesson. I said, good. He goes, but guess what, Dad? I said, what? He goes, life isn't fair to you today because you want to work, but you have to play video games with me right now. So there's a life lessons to everything. And I ended up playing video games with him after that. So and we all have our challenges. We all have our obstacles. It's how do you overcome these obstacles? How do you say, instead of complaining about these obstacles in front of you, how do you jump over them? How do you go around them? That's what life's all about. So that's the first thing that my dad's taught me. And the second thing is follow your passion. Follow what you love. And if anybody saw Steve Jobs' Stanford commencement speech, he talks about that. Is follow your passion. Because live every day like it could be your last day. So when you go to sleep at night, you felt like you've made a difference and you feel good about what you do. A lot of people haven't found their passion. My oldest son, who just went to college this year, hasn't found his passion. But the goal in if you follow your passion, you will do so much more. And my father followed his passion, and my mother followed their passion, and that was to sacrifice everything they had to come over here to give the future generations a new life. And I would say create great memories out of that. Go to every wedding and every funeral you can, because it might not be the most important day in your life, but it's certainly the most important day in someone's life that's out there, and they will remember it forever. And the third thing, and what Education Nation is all about, and wrap it up, is at the end of the day, I think my legacy should be, I worked 16 years at GE Capital, this great company. I worked 9 years at IBM, another great company, and I'm working at NBC News now, great company. But I want my legacy to be more than just having a great job and a great career. I want my legacy to be about giving back and doing something different. And that's why I'm committed to Education Nation, because at the end of the day, my legacy, the only thing I can do for my parents as their legacy is to give back and sacrifice the next generation what they did for me. Okay? Thank you very much.